Hi and welcome to the weekly predictions for the week of June 3rd, 2019. First, let's take a quick look at and recap the predictions and what had transpired the previous week. I made the predictions for the stock market moves, where Monday obviously was a close day where US markets were off, but then for Tuesday and Friday, I thought that the market will go up and then that there will be a drop midweek, so especially Wednesday and on Thursday, Friday, I thought that things may reverse to up, but it was only 55% chance, so just a very slight probability. So in reality, on Tuesday, the market actually went down, and it did on Wednesday as predicted, but then on Thursday it was slightly up, and on Friday, where I thought it might actually turn back up, again, the prediction probability was low, but there was actually a fairly large drop due to the concerns about the Mexico tariffs announced by Trump the day before. So as far as other predictions and for either global predictions or for the US, on Monday there was some news in the US where basically the news were about the measles outbreak growing to larger proportions, and basically with the cases reaching over, I guess, 60 new cases across 26 states, and that basically is a worst outbreak since '94. And the predictions for that week, global predictions, were, as well as for the US, that there will be focused in that week on things like oil, Navy, pharmaceuticals, as well as the infectious sort of diseases and chemicals, drugs, poisons, etc. So basically all of the kind of issues that have to do with Neptune, and certainly the outbreak of this contagious disease would also fall into that. Another kind of ongoing prediction is about ongoing sort of tensions in the world, and again, increased probability of either earthquakes or attacks or violent terrorist attacks or just accidents or like old buildings collapsing, old government leaders or corporate leaders leaving or being replaced. So kind of major transformations in things that are seen as unmovable and steady. And what we have seen, unfortunately, there was news also on Monday about an attack on school children Tokyo, where 13 school children were injured, and there was also on Tuesday news about the fire in one of the really old landmark buildings in the US, the Ambassador Hotel that first opened in 1904. So that both kind of fell under the prediction that I made specifically for the US, that this week, or that week rather, there would be increased focus on specifically hot weather, accidents, and fires. And similarly, it is sort of another example of events where landmarks, old buildings that are, again, had been standing there for a long time, they suffer damage that requires rebuilding and transformation. So old buildings, they fall under, again, something like Saturn, old, unmovable, established, and then Pluto is now basically joining Saturn and coming close and closer to it. And Pluto requires total transformation, where it may require death or some sort of a disruption that leads to total rebuilding of the status quo. And so that's why I said the leaders may be leaving, and they have been, such as the Emperor of Japan or the, I guess, President of Kazakhstan. So people who were in power for decades, many of them have already announced basically they have left this year or announced that they would be leaving. And similarly, we had not that long ago news about the Notre Dame also suffering in the fire. So things that again involve these either established companies or established sort of relationship between countries or old structures that may be destroyed in either an accident or just there's a decision to rebuild them. That would be obviously the best case scenario when you have old infrastructure and simply there's a decision to invest money and rebuild it from scratch. And speaking of Saturn Pluto, little, I guess, side note is that this aspect, the positive manifestation of this aspect would be if somebody were to say wanted to have an operation that helps to restore health to their teeth or bones or something that, you know, is difficult to move. Maybe they were in a cast or something that they were struggling with for a long time, and this old kind of a painful thing needs to be removed. But this would be a good time to do it, and even the healing process may take a long time. These things kind of need to be done carefully and slowly, but the effect might be truly transformational. There may also be either news or kind of discoveries that have to do with like old age or healing, regeneration of the bones or teeth, or anything kind of that helps to slow death or change, transform death experience in some way, because Pluto also rules transformation. So those could be truly positive experiences. Again, these things take a long time, but the effect might be long lasting and positive if, again, this energy is used properly. So as far as US prediction again for last week was that there will be kind of bad weather, especially hot weather, accidents and fires. I did see also last Tuesday that there was news about kind of US experiencing an outbreak of tornadoes, greater than usual, I guess, number of tornadoes. I'm not sure if they're associated specifically with hot weather or just winds, but that's something I've seen. Another sort of interesting thing to note with the Saturn and Pluto, as far as this aspect kind of being in the background for months, but the topics associated with that would be, again, mining, secret sort of events, underground events, transformations in sort of geopolitical arena, but also literally like mining and digging, burying something, recycling, recycling because you take trash and you transform it into something useful. And so there were a lot of news last week, curious news about the Twitter, I guess, having some viral videos about the Indian diggers, JCB. Then there was also like news about Asian countries like Malaysia and Philippines basically refusing and shipping back illegally dumped waste after like China and India have refused recycling. Some of the waste, was dumped illegally, or maybe in parallel with that was basically dumped in other Asian countries, and now they're refusing the illegal waste or waste that contaminated in the ways that were not, was not specified in, I guess, the documents. So, and there was also news about this show on about Chernobyl, US TV show that has gained popularity and was extremely highly rated. And that's curious again because the Saturn-Pluto aspect that is becoming kind of more and more precise, that I expect may not lead, but necessarily coincide with some disaster, including nuclear power disaster or disaster that involves like nuclear waste leaking somewhere, is indeed an aspect that is associated with nuclear power and disasters. And here we have a show about the disaster in the nuclear power plant becoming popular and gaining high scores from the critics at this time. And so let's see, then on Wednesday of last week there were some news from Hungary that in Budapest a tour boat sank with at least 7 people now dead and 21 still missing, and at least as a few days ago. And that's the worst river disaster there in over 50 years. And again, like I said last week, my predictions were that there will be increased focus on like navy, oil, shipments over water, transportation over water, and things like that. And let's see, there was also focus in the news on whether or not it sort of could have a negative effect on the US economy if China were to cut off the rare earth supply to the US, whether it actually may happen or not. I personally don't know, but again, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction does kind of is a manifestation, or can be manifested as indeed such an event, because it is both related to minerals, soil, earth, anything that's like mined from the earth, but also Saturn has to do with like scarcity, and Pluto has to do with transformation. So things that are scarce, they somehow may be transformed. Again, if there's a scarcity, that indeed countries to which the supplies may be cut off, they may indeed successfully come up with alternatives should such a thing happen. Obviously, it may not be happening overnight. Saturn makes things take time, so does Pluto. It's those two slow-moving planets. But a transformation in that area is quite possible, where indeed it could come to sort of a trade war escalating to that, but then it may also be an impetus for defining alternatives. But a threat, certainly, I would say, is real. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the world will crash. It just means that Pluto may kind of facilitate a transformation in that area where things change and status quo changes from what it has been for, decades. Let's see, there was also news that I specifically predicted for the US that there would be, particularly at the end of the week, May 31st, increased news about communication and transportation businesses, telecoms, IT, high-tech, aerospace, electric cars, etc., communication, transportation, like I said, in general. And indeed, on Thursday of last week, there was this news where Trump had imposed tariffs on Mexico, and given that the top 3 US imports from Mexico specifically involve new cars and trucks, auto parts, and computer equipment, these all are areas kind of astrologically governed by the same planet, which is Mercury, and that's sort of what I was also seeing in the chart, that there would be some surprising news related to those kind of mercurial areas. And I would say this may have been a surprise that that tariff, or maybe either the size or the date of the announcement, I think was a surprise. And so another, I would say, surprising event related again to those same areas like social media and communication services was an outage of Google services that occurred on Sunday, June 2nd, where in North America and some parts of Europe there were some disruptions of Google services, Google being the US company. Let's see, and also a sort of the ramping up of the events that I think may increase specifically in June was an announcement on Saturday, June 1st, of the major blast in like central city in Russia, Dzhinsk, where there was a blast that had occurred at the research institute that specializes in kind of scientific and technological support and the research for the explosive materials, and that blast had damaged about 200 buildings. So I believe nobody was hurt, which obviously is great. At the same time, this is the sort of the type of event that we may hear more about in June specifically, and then later in September will be another time period this year that will be pretty, I would say, tense. And following that would be about January of 2020. So let's see, now getting back to this week, the week of June 3rd. Again, I think that there will be major focus on Neptunian sort of areas. These involve oil, chemicals, gas, navy, shipment, transportation over water, religion, sort of places of worship. Let's see, music and movies, anything again related to Neptune, so any sort of deception, lies, confusion, and specifically for oil, and I guess other areas as well, like pharmaceuticals. There may be some ramping up again in this week of some events that will kind of escalate even more next week or two, where again there may be some tensions, where maybe shipment is blocked somewhere, be due to some embargo, or just problems with the weather is too wet, too much flooding, or it's just something that accumulates, or there's imbalance where maybe one type of oil is not available, but there's oversupply of another type of oil, like things like crude or versus something else, light or something along those lines. But basically where the facility is sitting, and empty or is low, and maybe there's an oversupply of some other type of chemical, or the shipment of chemical is, blocked, and maybe there's or maybe there's an epidemic where again some sort of a drug is really needed, but drug cannot get there again because of the problems with shipments, problems with legal approval of the drug, or perhaps or maybe there is a problem. Again, legal approval is not reached, so the large supply of drug need to be even destroyed, perhaps. Or maybe there's a chemical pollution and therefore the shipment cannot go through. So any sort of combination of these kind of themes, with the worst scenarios being literally like fires, explosions, oil spills and wars, attacks. And this week this would not be as much of a probability, but certainly we may see something building up that may escalate quite dramatically next week or two, especially around June, I would say 14th, and for oil maybe around the 23rd. So let's see, wet weather, along with earthquakes. Again, this week things are starting to kind of ramp up, but it may be a lot worse next week. And again, if there are sort of events that involve, say, terrorist attacks or fires or some accidents, chances are they will be related again to Neptune, so something along the lines of, like, again, places of worship, concert halls, movie theaters, or they're done by people who are from that industry, or say somebody who's on drugs, who is mentally not stable, because again, Neptune gives you like these things where you're hallucinating, or you're kind of, your mind is not, stable. So let's see. So floods, definitely, chemical spills, bad weather, gas leaks, all of the above this week, but especially into next week. Then there will be continuing global tensions. And one thing to note about all these tariffs and taxes and whatnot, that because right now Jupiter is retrograde, and its retrograde period this year is from about April 11th through August 11th, that anything sort of legal, which is what Jupiter rules, or international relations or international agreements that are made at this time, they may be revised once the Jupiter turns direct after August 12th. So things kind of may be, like I said, revised or even completely dissolved. So agreements or decisions that are being made right now may not be stable or long-lasting. Let's see. So yes, this week, the tensest days as far as like probability of all these accidents and horrible things are Thursday and Friday, actually Wednesday through Friday, and then next week will be even more tense, especially Monday, even Sunday, Monday, things will start kind of getting even worse with news of like bad accidents, tsunami, floods, and some damage, to recycling facilities, and including nuclear power plants or some recycling areas that may potentially carry some radioactive materials. So the continuing prediction also for the, I guess not the continuing, but rather the new prediction for the US this week is that there may be increased focus on military partnerships, aggressive international negotiations, again, hot weather, accidents, and fires, but also there may be some increased arguments with international partners, and increased stock market volatility, and that will be again the strongest on Thursday, Friday. This whole week, including just June in general, there may be also increased focus on banks and finance, and some kind of concerns about the inside threats, where again all countries are going to be focusing on their homeland security, protecting their savings, kind of sort of trying to avoid taking too much risk and trying to save things at home as much as possible, or protect their domestic industries. And I've made this prediction months ago that, again, especially the period from like June 8th or 22nd to the 23rd looks like a very tense period, and that's both geopolitically as well as, like I said, focus on for sort of fighting over oil or just accidents due to bad weather, and some natural disasters where a lot of people may be involved and suffer from basically some hardship. And it's also not a good time for leaders who are, especially leaders who are older, like in age or established, or leaders who are very rigid, conservative. They too may be in kind of either physical danger or in danger of being removed, more so than usual. Ongoing prediction for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that June and May are tense months for her, and in particular, I'll mention in a second also that for the US, there are some indications that there may be some additional increased news about like judges or prominent people in the legal sort of sphere. So it may or may not be her, but she definitely is having some sort of a, I would say, difficult time right now, just based on aspects to her chart, and it could manifest as health problems or increased workload where she may feel stressed and maybe even leave the office or at least take a break. And for China, there's long-lasting influence that also indicates additional stress, additional increased probability of earthquakes, disasters, and some tensions related to Navy, oil, pharmaceuticals, etc. And for this weekend, I guess next week too, for China, June 4th through 14th is also quite tense and indicates increased problems with partners, arguments, and military posturing. So, and there might be some resolution occurring around June 14th. So it's possible that there may be some buildup in those tensions that then resolve or culminate with some either explosive event or some resolution that calms things down around June 14th. So for Monday, and I guess through the entire week, I predict that the market will be down. So it will be a down week overall. And today is actually Monday. I'm already recording it a day later, but I have posted my predictions on tolstunka.com on Sunday, and I did see that market was mixed, where Nasdaq really had dropped. Dow Jones was down for a large part of the day, but at the very end of the day, it snuck in like 0.02% up. But so far, I guess it's not looking that great, but my prediction is basically down the entire week. Also for June 3rd, 4th, so Monday, Tuesday, I predict that there may be globally increased news about like IT cars, social media, airplanes, transportation and communication businesses in general, as well as retail sales, agreements, and contracts. And we may hear specifically about new projects, leaders, initiatives, and I didn't know, I guess I must be living under a rock, but Apple, I guess, had their annual conference, some sort of presentation when they announced new products, etc. And so I've noticed this before when they announced the release of some other phone. I think it was a phone that they have timed it such that it was beneficial astrologically, that the time was good. Like today we had a new moon in Gemini, which again is ruled by Jupiter, that has to do with like phones, sort of communication, and it is certainly an auspicious time to launch a new product that relates to those kind of mercurial areas such as phones and anything to do with communication and IT. So let's see. For the US, June 3rd through 5th, so Monday through Wednesday, I think there is a increased probability of a prominent leader, such as a politician or an actor, experiencing an attack, physical or verbal, or just being in an accident where their health is experiencing stress, or there may be increased probability of fires, explosions, especially underground at recycling facilities, mines, etc. And there again, maybe, like I said, increased sort of aggressive negotiations with threatening things either militarily or just being sort of aggressive and taking more risk and pressing sort of their partners more, and or there may be increased news about literally just sales of weapons or increased sort of investments that benefit the weapons manufacturers. For the Tuesday, as I said, the market down, and then for the US, the prediction for June 4th through 7th is that there may be additionally, like I said, first part of the week, increased news about maybe attacks on or problems with health for prominent leaders who are like politicians or actors or athletes, maybe probably male figures. On the 4th through 7th, there may be increased news about health problems or some delays or basically inavailability of leaders who are like older, more conservative. Perhaps they're again judges or lawyers, or they're leaders of major like large corporations or governments. And so there may also be anger either at those leaders or at government the officials or corporate leaders in general, because there may be news about some downsizing or reducing costs or introducing more regulations and controls. And in parallel, there may be concerns about like infrastructure that involves like old buildings that may be crumbling, or structures that are made of stone and metal. But again, they're old, they've been standing there for a while. There may be anger over whether or not these things are being fixed on time, or there may be some, like I said, news about, say, downsizing, and there's not enough money to fix those things, and it may anger people. And or there just may be problems for like metal manufacturers. Maybe there's not enough metal as far as supplies, or for some reason there's, the plant is stalled because it can't, produce what it needs to produce. And or there may be problems with tunnels, bridges, all structures in general, as well as increased probability of earthquakes, attacks of various sorts, and accidents. For Wednesday, Thursday, no additional predictions. For Wednesday, Wednesday and Friday of this week, I think it's the highest probability of those days being down. So they kind of look the worst. And then towards the end, I think things will be escalating. Like if the week turns out to be kind of stressful, unfortunately next week I predict will be even worse, including over the weekend. There may be news literally like on Sunday about increased tensions and international negotiations for the US and internationally. There may be additional focus on like immigration, laws, judges, laws, long distance transportation, and higher education. So sort of the values or laws, legal system, these things will be involved, where certain what's the right thing to do will be reevaluated, and that would be towards the end of the week for the US. But globally there may be increasing tensions accompanied by potentially, like I said, earthquakes, some disasters, accidents, bad weather, especially including involving imbalanced distribution of water. Maybe one place is flooding, another place is suffering from the drought. But whatever we're going to see this week, maybe some trembling in some places, or some kind of skirmishes that are beginning to occur, those places will be especially vulnerable come next week. And as early as Sunday through Monday, June 10th, there may be really sort of increased fighting. And Monday morning and the entire day on Monday, June 10th, I believe will be a pretty strong sort of influence day, where will be increased moves in the stock market. And most likely, I think, will be a big down day. And again, the focus on oil will be increasing all week, as well as pharmaceutical, chemicals, etc. And there may be some kind of concerns about either oil availability or shipments or trade, or bad weather, like I said, or spills on Monday, especially Monday morning of June 10th. So kind of definitely week to stay alert. And for next week, I would recommend basically be prepared. Chances are many people in whose horoscope these transits will trigger other planets, they may experience basically they're being very busy with a lot of like meetings, or suddenly they need to travel somewhere, or when they travel somewhere they're stuck there because again of this imbalance and some problems with communication, transportation, perhaps due to bad weather or some accidents. So kind of plan, have a plan B and prepare, kind of ideally get things done before, I'd say, the 9th of June, because like 9th through, I'd say, 14th of June will be quite tense, and then things will continue to be tense through, I'd say, the end of June, but maybe it will be slightly better. And also if you're entering into like legal agreements or signing some important legal documents, I would say maybe wait until after like August 12th, after Jupiter turns direct. And if you have to do it before that, just make sure that you look for all the information very thoroughly. Chances are there may need to be some revisions because somebody had forgotten something, or there was some confusion, something was misrepresented or kind of inflated and occurred or appeared rather better than it could have been, especially related to like, again, oil, water, gas, oil, etc. So that's it. Today I guess I was talking for a long time. Hopefully you didn't fall asleep. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will come back and check me out next week. And until then, see you.